Okay.
Microphone. Yeah.
Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone here physically at this tadi sidang room, and also for the online participants. Okay, we are very happy to have with us here Professor Georg Hauer, who is the AAGBS professor. He is from Stuttgart, and he will be here with us here at AAGBS for about 2 weeks. Okay, so we are very happy to have Professor Hauer to give a talk this morning on sustainable business requirements and opportunities, European Perspective 2022. So without further ado, I would like to invite Prof. Hauer to give his talk. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Athena, for this kind introduction and a warm welcome to the audience here in the teleconference room, but also online. Talk today about sustainable business, requirement, opportunities from a European perspective, providing you some examples from the European Union, but also the company examples. But let me first introduce myself for those who are not knowing me. Also, I think I met already some or most of you in the past years. I studied business administration and law back in Germany, did my PhD at University of Regensburg and was working there as a professor. Then I left academics, was with IBM for 11 years before I was re-entering academics in my current position as a business administration, as well as the dean of the program at the Stuttgart University of Applied Science. But this is the requirement for professors at the University of Applied Science have both qualifications, both PhD, but as well as you have at least 5 years of industry experience. Good. Now, what is the topic of today? Sustainable business. I will a little bit first talk about the big picture of the United Nations development goals and what was the European Union was implemented in terms of a so-called European Green Deal. And then having 2 examples. One is Deutsche Post, DHL Group. I think most know about DHL. And the second, and very small example, a startup called Cisco. But also then give some other company examples with it. Now, starting with Europe, when the United Nations Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has worked out 7 development goals, which has been adopted in the Development Summit in New York in September 2015. 2015 is anyhow as a year where more or less always this development climate targets has been agreed on an international level, because this year also the Paris Agreement of climate change was taken into effect. In particular, the 17 goals addressing in general end of poverty, end of hunger, health, but also gender equality. But what we are talking today most is about goal 6, which is availability, sustainability of water. Goal 7, which is about access of sustainable energy. But this needs to be linked with Goal 8, which is about promoting sustainable economic growth, because it makes no sense to have just clean water and maybe energy, but no economic environment. All this is based on a resilient infrastructure, which is Goal 9, and Goal 12, which is concentrating on the consumption as a private user mode. And goal 13 is more or less just formulating again this actions to combat climate change and its impact. So this perspective, these goals are somehow overlapping. So for example, so climate change was just formulated there, very visible and very obvious. Also, it's I view included in all the others, because we need to attack it in order to prevent. Now, as a bigger picture, but more or less defined as goal for the whole world, developed or developing. And what's come out for the Union is what we call this new Green Deal. Formulated by the European Commission, is a response to climate change and try to address a new growth strategy to transform the European Union into a fair and prosperous society with modern, resource-efficient and a competitive economy, where we are having net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. Which means that by 2050 at least, we need to decouple the economic growth and the resources, use of resources. So somehow we need to find a way that the resources, at least for energy, but also for more or less for all other resources, get been which is a big challenge ahead of us. We can have a bigger and further look into it here. Maybe you cannot really read it, therefore I will talk about it. The Green Deal leads to a transformation to improve the well-being and health of the citizen by, first, is zero pollution. It means you have trees, fresh air, clean water, healthy soil, and biodiversity. So this is something like to preserve the nature. In terms of, for example, having national parks or national forests and all these things in order to protect, because what we see, and unfortunately in Europe, 500 years too late, or even 200 that trees and the environment is very much important process. Second is a farm to fork initiatives, which means that you need to have vegetables, healthy and affordable food, which is very much linked to this trees stuff together, because you need to have not too much of this farmland in order to have some wooden area for another generation. So this both is more or less addressing this area of using the land with farms or wooden area. Second area is so-called smart mobility, which is a move to more public transportation, but also having building renovated and energy efficient buildings, which is, in your area, I think it's more about to have air conditioning. In our environment, it's more about heating. And in the heating environment, you need to be more efficient in order to keep the temperature in the house and to be able to prevent losses of the. To be honest, it would be okay, it's the same story, only it's the other way around. To keep coolness in the house and prevent to have coming in, exactly. And the idea behind is to have it most efficient building already in order to prevent to have much energy use for doing this. Then in order to combine all of the what is so-called circular economy, which means that products need to be repaired, recycled, or reused. And we are already introduced some of this recycling stuff, but the idea is more before recycling to have some repair and other reuses. So, for example, in Union, we are talking now about that for all your smartphones, you only will have one charging plug. That in future, when you buy a new smartphone, most probably you will buy just without charger, because what we detect, you always get a smartphone and a charger. You will withdraw a functioning charger because his lifetime is more than whatever 2 to 3 years where you're using it. But this is only working with standardized charging plug, because if you have everybody has a different one, it's not working. Just a very small example for driving this reuse, because it's better to reuse it rather than recycle it. Clean energy, we talked about, story behind of this is it's fine to have it as a public goal, but you will not be able to finance all this stuff just with public money. For example, this building what I mentioned, most of the buildings are done private, not public. So behind of this Green Deal is to mobilize private funds in not just terms of public infrastructure, but more to motivate public, private investors to invest in buildings which already fulfill these requirements. But also, and somehow to make it more attractive to invest in green investments rather than traditional investments. So, idea behind this Green Deal is on one side to have really public initiatives going on for supporting green elements, all areas of the economy. But the second, equally important stuff is to have this financing, green financing. A little bit complicated areas. The idea behind is that the European Union is establishing a framework for sustainable finance. Means that we will have a framework explains or ensures the investments in green projects, companies, getting qualified and identified as green investments. Means that we will avoid to have greenwashing. So you have some investments are labeled green and everybody will try to invest there, but are effectively not really supporting this. And with this, we are hoping that we would able to leverage financial power of the public plus private to get this transformation established. Because in the moment, we do not have any regulations, none were about to define what is a green investment. So all about, you may see investments or funds or which call themselves green or ESG or something like that. But you cannot be sure what is it, because there is no regulations going on. Some private initiatives going on how to do reporting there, but there is no framework. So this is the area where the European Union is addressing it. So we have built up and set up at least a draft of the European framework taxonomy regulation, which is telling about that every company, bigger company, to report and disclose their revenue, CapEx, OpEx, in the terms of what of this revenue, CapEx, OpEx, has been provided in conventional part or in part. And green is defined as climate change mitigation, climate change adoption, sustainable use of water and marine resources, transition to a circular economy, pollution prevention, and protection of restoration of biodiversity. This includes that business activities needs to comply with social safeguards. So you have a list at least with the social element in it. What we are currently discussing about are technical classifications on which part is sustainable and not. And in Europe, we have a little bit of struggle going on whether, for example, nuclear power is recognized as environment friendly or not. The current draft is that nuclear power is part of environment friendly till 2035 as a transitional period. Main reason for this is France. The French government asked for it because they are very much needed for a transition period of time. The German government may know the government, the Green Party as ruling party, also three parties, they are all. But in the greater Europe, I am sure it is continue to stay in the draft and will be coming in law. But regardless that it out, the importance there is a set of definitions there, what is defined as EU, and therefore is not part of this definition, is not part of it. So you have at the end non-financial statements or even financial statements where you can really show by a company which part of your business is sustainable in terms of environment, social, and the governance perspective of following the and which one is conventional and not. Now, this is effectively it should be already in place since the 1st of January 2022. I have some doubt because there is only a draft available and not really anyone, and it needs to be ratified by the parliament before, so it may lead over time before it gets really effective. But at least on today, and you will have the first framework, a little bit like the international framework, IFRS, in terms of a framework which defines ESG reporting in a general way how to do it. Mind you, a major, as I mentioned, regardless of finding nuclear in, at least you know that what are the content while just relying on something which is visible. Now, companies like, for example, DHL, it's not an easy task. To explain a little bit about Deutsche Post, DHL, they have more or less two brands. One is Deutsche Post, which is the German parcel and post service provider, and second one is DHL, which is the international parcel and express service. Roughly about 600,000 people, 570,000 people working in all over the world, 220 countries and territories. Roughly about 66 billion of revenue. And you can imagine that Texas has a lot of sustainability issues because transport, supply chain management is something via natural resources, and how can sustainable. So on the other hand, DHL is an international company, so it's not owned by German government anymore. So the Deutsche Post, DHL, is 100% privatized. So no stake of public anymore in it. And active, they are very relying on investors, and some funds and others are required, pension funds and others are required to invest in ESG investments. So therefore, you are more or less driven simply by this situation, especially companies like this one, that they are proving that what is their ESG status. So environment and government status. So DHL is going a little bit active in terms of their really having a group strategy where they are addressing the United Nations Development Goals. In particular, the goal of education and lifelong learning, gender equality, but also sustainable economic growth, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and sustainable. And if you think about all those parcel service, they deliver all your e-commerce. Not true about here in the city where I live. We have now 5 different parcel services which are serving us. So if you are staying at home in the morning, you have 5 different drivers arriving and bringing parcels to different households. Yeah, 5 different hands are driving around. So they have to think about how can it really a contribution to this. Which makes them take action for 13 to combat climate change and working on sustainable development. Now, on how the text are combat climate change, the 13th they try to identify the same as European Union. Mission 2050 is zero emission. Now, there's still about 28 days to go, but not starting, you will not achieve it. So what they did also is milestone, the first milestone, 2030. In 2030, they will try to invest about 7 billion in key operations to reduce emissions from 33 megaton in 2020 to 29 megaton in 2030, which is not much, but to enjoy it because in the same time they will increase business. So effectively, the reduction was 2020 to 2030, you will have like an increase of revenue by 5%, and if you have to reduce your absolute, so your gross pollution by 10%, effectively you have something about 30% compared to the current situation. And how can it? First of all, and this is the main contribution, working on the last mile. Just the different vans which are driving around. His idea is to have about 60% of the last mile delivery electrified. I have not seen in Kuala Lumpur too many of battery electric cars already. In Germany, or DHL is implementing with vans battery electric van, because from a perspective, normally a car like this driving around about 80 to 100 kilometers a day, which could be recharged very quickly, which is not require a big battery and could be recharged overnight the next day. Question is just that we have enough electric power grid around there for it and do it work. So this is capable. It will not work for all because not in all countries you have it. So you have to deliver on the countryside. The rural areas may not work because if you have there any problem, you won't get it. Yeah. And other side, they're working on increase the share of sustainable fuels. So for example, in the area where you have not something like battery, try to substitute petrol by some type of fuel which is being worked with bio energy like this. Yeah. Next thing would be lead in sustainable aviation. There you might be surprised, but DHL is operating a fleet of freighters, so planes which are delivering parcels and others from country to country, from continent to continent. And their battery is not yet really a story about, and they are still at the very beginning of about changing the fuel from petrol to somehow any bio area. Therefore, in my view, it's a very aggressive goal to have 30% of this fuel already substituted by sustainable aviation fuel, because to be honest, there is currently zero available. And third thing is about this carbon neutral buildings, which is a major part, at least in the northern part of the continent, more or less, or one part of the world, also in the southern part. So not here in the, when you are talking about your area, but in Europe, in North America, but also in South America, or even in South Africa. Because about 30% of the total energy of Europe, also North America, is in buildings, so for heating or cooling. And therefore, if you address this, you can save it. And also DHL is, you have a lot of parcel environment, so you need to work on this. This try to design all new buildings at least carbon neutral. This is more or less the biggest challenge for the whole, not just for DHL, but also for all the environment, because you can address new buildings, but what you are doing with existing buildings. But if you are not starting to implement, it will take much more time. Now, this is the environmental, the most important part. But requirement to get qualification with this European framework is also to have social components in it, and therefore you need to address it here. So what they are addressing here is a regular one which you may see from all companies, like to attract and the war of talents, but also like safety first culture to reduce the accident rate, diversity, inclusion, and respect to human rights. As I mentioned before, why is this here in this reporting in? Because part of the ESG to get recognized as environmental friendly in the European framework is that you're ensuring that it's respecting the human rights, and therefore you need to address it in your strategy. And last one is about how you organize this in terms of how you can ensure that all your reporting, and especially your non-financial reporting is really trusted. Therefore, also governance and compliance management. So they will have a compliance management include in the code of conduct something like this compliance on an environment as well, and also set up something like an effective ESG governance in terms, for example, for ESG KPIs integrated into the internal and external reporting. External reporting, say we need to include according to the EU framework, but if you are only including the external one, cannot be ensured that the management is also driving it. So you need also to include it in the internal reporting in order to be able to distribute targets to the different units and managements. And last, on the right side, you see robust supplier management. The story behind is that in the European framework, it stated that you are also responsible for all your supplier emissions, means, and also the social environment, means that you will need to have some insurance from your supplier what are their greenhouse emissions, which is a little bit tricky because you may have hundreds, thousands of suppliers. How you can do this calculation? At least you need to have somehow written down for something, for example, in the contracts, that they will provide you some assumptions on this or ensure something like this. So, giving you some insights here. Let's go back. Here, as I mentioned, the reduction of this greenhouse gases, different on the left-hand side, you will see different initiatives. Like I mentioned before about the sustainable aviation fuels, electrification of this last mile vans, but also buildings or anyhow to have green alternatives on the products is required because effectively this reduction to 29 from 30 something 33 currently is effectively not 33, but the protection, if they are not doing anything in terms of optimizing greenhouse gases, they would have greenhouse gases in 2030 of 46 megaton. And therefore the reduction they need to ensure by 36 is not the 10% of 3 to 4 megawatt, if you recall, but it's 17, which is about 1/3 of the greenhouse compared to today. So this is just to prove that, that they need to start now in order to think about, in order to keep the level or having a slight downturn by 10% compared to today, because otherwise in 10 years' time would have an increase from 30 to 46, which means that we really need to start now in order to be able to keep this level and to be on the path of reduction. Now, second chart to a little bit illustrate what is the challenge here, because the regulations require that you are reporting all the total greenhouse gases. Means one is very simple, it's the so-called scope 1. This is in the middle. Scope 1 would be all greenhouse gases from our own vehicles, our own areas, which we can control very much. But you need also to include scope 2. So for example, when you are buying anything from any of your supplier. So it would be electricity you are buying from external suppliers, for example. Is this electricity done with gas, fuel, or solar energy? And if you are buying something, you need to have again a certificate whether this is from solar energy, which would be then carbon neutral, or whether this electricity is provided by oil and others. Not sure, are you getting here in Asia any feedback from your electricity supplier, what they are using for your electricity?
Coal. Coal still.
Only coal?
Hydro.
Hydro, yeah. And, but yeah, but you get information about what they have used.
Mostly coal.
Yeah, but you get something like a certificate that in your energy is 50% coal. No?
No.
Yeah, this is.
The customer, they're sharing that information.
To the customer, no.
Yeah, but this is required. So it's already provided for consumers. So for example, I have the choice whether I will buy a green energy or conventional one or others. Just for the consumer is a choice. For the companies like DHL, it's important because this is very much important for his reporting. He needs to include, and to include, he needs to know about. So he needs to be in feedback whether in his energy, in his electric energy, is getting from some different suppliers, whether this is done with solar, with coal or gas or hydro, whatever. So in order to be able to do this framework, you need this information. And as mentioned, in Europe, it's also required to provide the customer with this information. So when I get my bill is normally about 5 pages, because yeah, the first one is the important one about what I have to pay. And the second one is statistics about our usage. And the third and the fourth page then is about what is the average of all households in our size. And the last one is then about the structure of the energy which had been used to produce it.
When did this start, this policy?
The policy about 5 years ago, something like this.
Was there a study indicating that the consumption shifted from companies using less carbon fuel as compared to renewable energy? So was there a policy correlation in that sense?
From a consumer perspective, yeah. The demand for renewable energy is going on.
Because it's cheaper, or is it the same?
No, to be honest, it's more expensive.
More expensive?
It was at least till this year. It was more expensive.
Okay.
This year it's the opposite way around, due to the problems we have with energy supply from Russia. For companies, it's also a question of getting cost. But the next story is about this reporting stuff, because you need always this information to get included in your calculation. As mentioned, it's not just your own supply in terms of what you are using for your own cars or whatever. It's also what you're getting from your supplier, and it's getting even a step further. Then you are, as a company, are using any subcontractor who are, for example, operating your van fleet or something like this. You need also to include their emissions into this. So also you need to get from them some assumptions, some information, some proof. And therefore this information, availability of information is very important stuff in order to go forward. And as I mentioned, I think about 5 years ago, this big picture or this big information was introduced in order to have transparency. Because what we had at this point of time going up, that you could buy green energy, green electric energy. But what is green electric energy? Energy, to be honest, is you build your plant and go in. And energy, you can never see whether it's green or not green. It's energy, it's electric energy. And
sorry, Georg.
Yeah.
That's a question. If companies do not comply, do they penalties imposed on them, or it's basically the consumer does not buy them? How does it go?
Up to now, we have no real punishment in it, but you will see one example where it starts to get some punishment. Currently, it's more about consumer transparency, that you are not really buying something you think it's green, which is not green. And first, you need to define what is green. We will see later on in this area, when we will have this framework really introduced, then you will have some problems if you are not compliant, because then, for example, on stock exchange, you may get delisted. Currently, we have the situation that in one case, and I will show you later on, you have police coming on because some finance industry was promoting something as green, which has been not green. And from there, you have an area where you have stock prospects and information which has been untrue. And this untrue information, this led to a police raid just recently at Deutsche Bank. But this was a little bit, not directly, but behind, because the story was not the wrong reporting. The story was the wrong reporting in the stock listing. And the stock listing looking wrong, and this was getting punished. But in future, we will have it directly when this framework of the European Union gets really effective and defined, because then then we also have some punishment when you are not. But if you're reporting then that you are not complying, it will not have a difference, but everybody will know it.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because SDG doesn't come cheap.
Yeah.
It is a cost for companies to comply. It might be more easier for the developed nations standpoint because they are ready, they have more capabilities in that sense. But from a developing nation standpoint, we don't have that capability in terms of adapting to SDG and how does it impact our cost. So this is the question, it's not a generic question in the sense that how does developed nations look into this? Because it is a global impact.
Yeah.
Developed nations do it and developing nations are not doing it.
No,
there's no impact.
Yeah.
So as of now, I'm just thinking of a developing nations. How does it work for us in the sense that how can we make it happen and how can we contribute towards this if there's no.
But I don't think that it's really so much a difference, because the first and important step is to get information about, because the ESG reporting requirement is not require any company to comply or set a goal like they are going. They are only require that you are providing information whether you are on the track or not. And then, to be honest, and then the consumer and the investors make the decision. And in my view, this way would work for developed as well as for developing countries. But
as it is right now, United Nations are not really monitoring every country in terms of how much they have achieved in terms of their SD goals also, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm in business because I am not really so much trust in public actions. And I think the really interesting step here is that this European New Deal is addressing two elements. This is addressing the public side, which we may talk about, whatever, changing it, but it's also talking about the private side. And the private investments would have a much bigger leverage than the others, because.
So like in maybe in the case of European Union and also specifically to Germany, it's a requirement for all listed companies to report their ESG every year?
It will be.
It will be.
Also, officially it is already since 1st of 2022, but unfortunately we are a little bit late running in really defining and setting up. But yeah, I expected it to be in 2000 end of this year, hopefully.
Is the government giving any incentives? I mean, he's talking about punishment. But to promote, is there any like incentives given to companies that fully comply with the reporting?
There's an incentive will be given that if somebody is not complying it, he will not be getting any money from pension funds and others which are required to only invest in ESG. It's very simple. Because at the end, we will have a lot of investors which are only investing in companies who are comply with this visibility and meet several standards. So
The Malaysian stock market also the same, right?
Yes,
SC is doing it, right?
Yeah,
SC.
for some reason has got the ESG rating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but then in terms of, let's say,
but officially it will be a punishment. So if you are not complying with it, you will have to pay whatever, some thousands.
But is there a sort of like a standard requirement, as in like in the carbon emission, you set certain targets that they need to achieve, how many percentage of saving? So every company will have their own aspiration, isn't it? I mean,
No. The important stuff to ESG is not to have savings. So what I have provided here for as a goal of this one is the own goal.
Yes.
The European Union is only required that you are reporting your consumption. And then you will see whether you are more or less having a revenue which is linked to green, or whether you have no revenue which is linked to green. So the framework is only require you to report. The assumption or the goals you are setting, it's up to you. So it's not driven by.
So as long as you report, that's fine.
Yeah, but when you are reporting and you're reporting that you have no green investments, none of the public, of the investors which are obliged to invest only in green will give you any money anymore. Quite the opposite. They will be required to go out of your investments, which will bring your stock price down.
So like in Malaysia currently, they're making it mandatory as well for all companies, the companies to have a separate sustainability report. So they will have to report all the ESG, greeness, but the thing is, it all depends on how much input that you put into the reporting initiatives that you have conducted, and it's just purely reporting. There's no like measurement or an indication in terms of, okay, this company has done more as compared to the others. It's just how much you report.
Okay, but it's already defined what is, for example, a green investment. So you have to find.
I mean, every company would give their own definition in terms of what is their aspiration, what are their goals that they want to achieve. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, from one company to the next, you won't be able to see this company is doing more, because maybe they're doing more. The report is like so much thicker than the others. So I mean, so far at the moment, I think there's no like measurement or target set. Even like, for example, our electricity board, they also have the net zero 2050 that they target, whereby hopefully by the end of 2050, no coal at all. But I think that would be quite impossible to achieve, and they have to start from now. So I mean, from one company to the next, the issue is that everyone is reporting, but it's just purely statement, and then maybe some indication in terms of how much reduction of carbon emission, how much, I mean, we have all these policies in place, but it doesn't really.
That probably would say that we are very much in the initial stage of upholding this ESG role.
But
so, like in Germany perspective, I mean, how is there a watchdog? Is there an authority that really monitors into this, or is the stock exchange as well that monitor?
No, the watchdogs are more or less environmental organizations who are at the end then bringing it to public or even bring it to justice in terms of filing something and then police is getting interfered. But the important stuff, I mean, again, is I don't think that any goals needs to be and can be defined by by government for individual companies. But it's very important to have defined what is green and what is not green. So that you have this transparency. So first step, you need to have the reporting. And in the reporting, it must be very clear what is in and what is out. Because what we are currently seeing, and this is exactly the thing what you're describing, is a lot of reports, more and less, hundreds of pages or only 30 pages, but no standards. And this is what will be described here, standards in terms of when you send, for example, to define part of revenues which is coming out of green or which is not out of green. And this is what currently is open in this framework, because there's only a draft of type of activities which are considered as green versus not considered as green. So any energy from coal will be considered as not green. And then you know exactly, okay, so if this is only having a percentage of 5% of green, it's not considered, I will not consider it as more as an SG investment.
And it goes back to the investors.
Yeah. At the end, the decision is on the investors, but the investors needs to have this clarity.
Is this happening also in the small scale investors, or just talking about the operation?
So the goal is that we have later on an example for small industry. So as a goal, it's also for the smaller ones, reporting it. But the idea or this framework of the European Union is only working for bigger one, because this is the one who get invested. The smaller one might be interested if there are more or less startups which we are looking for investments, because some of the startup funds, and since they are more, some of them are really publicly funded, have the same requirements in terms they are investing in green startups, and therefore they need somehow same environment. But the framework itself is only addressing bigger companies. To be honest, the smaller one, if you would make it mandatory for them, they would collapse. It's no way. For the bigger ones, it's mandatory starting to have this. But I mentioned it's not as easy. So, for example, you would have to do very simple, very interesting calculations in terms of calculating for all this different stuff. What is the real consumption there? And do some calculations for yourself, but also for suppliers, because you need to include it for everybody. In what I'm mentioning here, scope 1 is easy, scope 2 is more or less what you get from your suppliers as well as your subcontractors. But you need also to include scope 3, which are your business partners, which means that when you have any business partners for delivery to your customers, you need also to include this one. So you will set up a really big calculation and data information collection, including contracts in terms of providing you information. It's really incredible what you have to set up. This is, for example, DHL was starting about 5 years ago with the project of setting up something like an ESG reporting for the whole group.
So they do their reporting even up to scope 3.
Yeah. So, and as I mentioned, they will have to do this data gathering, data enrichment, calculations, then calculation, and at the end we have the reporting. So it's not done just with the data gathering and labeling, because all these providers for scope 2 and scope 3, you need to do more or less your own data enrichment and calculations. before you can do your reporting. At the end, I think it will end up at some point of time that we will have some auditing from this ESG reporting as we have it currently on the financial reporting. It's just a question of time when this will be. I think that as soon as a European framework will be really effective, it will be also to have some audit activities going on there in order to try to prove it. Because investors will ask for anyhow proof of your reportings. Currently, it's only limited area. So you see in the last line, audit and limited assurance level for non-financial statement by a group auditor. Because they are simply not trying, as the auditors are very reluctant to give you a full assurance. Yeah. But in my view, it will come. Because
it's a good business opportunity.
yeah. Because if you look for on both sides, by the way, for controller, you see the most increase in job advertisement in ESG reporting on both sides, on the company side as well as on the auditing side. So the big five are looking for people. Yeah, exactly. And the reason for this is why we see more and more of this greenwashing stuff, which is more or less misleading and untrue reporting, claiming, and getting even bigger because it's not just environmental, but also environmental, social, and governance. So also include, for example, this social element. And on the right-hand side, some examples. So IKEA was accused that they have some illegal logging of activities of the employees. H&M was sustainable fashion claims, so they had some sustainable, which is not sustainable. I personally am always getting really interesting when I see some advertisements for companies, Shell, others, or Total, for example, is currently going on, which are telling us that they are now, when you're knowing that 90% of the business is not. Unilever or KLM, for example, also is telling us, and I was flying with KLM here to Kuala Lumpur, misleading carbon claims, not the flight, but just about questions. Now, your question. Currently, just 3 months ago, Deutsche Bank and the AAGBS, which is an investment arm of Deutsche Bank, was built by German prosecutors to investigate allegations of greenwashing in the Luxembourg department. They had the law which was coming up and said there was not even any really check of the so there was labeled as green funds, and the investment strategy was a very conventional one without any. And the story behind was not really the environmental impacts. The story behind was really that the prospect for the stock exchange was claiming that it is an ESG-proofed investments. And the whistleblower was claiming that there is not any investigation going on or any system which is checking this one. So it was not really ESG, it was a little bit around. But when the framework getting ineffective, you will have something like this for companies who has misleading by not having it. Or then the auditors will not be proof anymore if you have no audited annual report, you will have run into problems. And this is really is a major step why we need this framework, and all countries need something like a framework. Now, here it's more in the way at the end, it's all about to try to promote green investments for public environment. And to have this as a shifting investments and self-promoted. For smaller companies, it's not working like this. For smaller companies, it's more working that they take the business opportunities which is coming out of sustainable behavior. So address it directly with the customers rather than to address it with investments, for letters. So example I have here is a company called Recap, addressing that we are having more and more waste coming out from using of to-go drinks, to-go coffee, to-go eating, and so on. And more cities, at least in Europe. So, for example, a city close to us is Tübingen. I know it, very small. And Tübingen was introducing a local tax for waste which has been disposable, which means that for companies it's getting less attractive to have it because they have to pay taxes. The tax is already collected from the company who is the local dealers, the local restaurants need to pay the tax. Now he can try to get it from the customer, he needs to increase the price, or he's paying it himself. So it's not, so he has to report how many boxes he is using, and the tax is based on him. So the idea is to have something like, and the idea of this recap is not to have really caps which can be getting to waste, but can be reused every time. And the problem here is you had it before just for the individual restaurants. In the individual restaurant you would get it. But if you talk about to-go coffee, I don't think that you return to your initially restaurant, because then you would have indoor dining rather than to go. Therefore, the idea behind is that you could give it back to any restaurants or any area. So you can really have it to go, and on the next occasion when you are there and you are empty, you go give it to the next one, and you will get your money back for it. So
Bring our own cups and plates and sauces.
yeah, this would be we will talk in a minute whether this is a better solution or not. But not all of you will have your own cups or your own method. So, for example, when I am traveling, normally I do not have it. The idea behind was to have this deposit network with partner locations all over the country, where you can get your cup but also return it and get a new one. And the really important stuff here is to have it as much as possible from them, to make it as convenient as possible for the customers. Because if you have to return to your own or just to bring it to the same chain, it would be not really very convenient. Yeah, and they also nowadays they had extended it to both as well. Now, what is advantage? Advantage would be easy to use. Alternative might be to have your own reusable cup. But then you need really to think about your reusable cup already at the beginning when you left your house, and also you have to take it when you go home. So maybe not. Our story is about when you do your own cup and you wash it by hand at home, you may use more energy and water than you are than it's washed in an more or less industrial machine. So in restaurants they had use only very little water and high heat to get it used. So from this water consumption, it would be more efficient to make it in a restaurant, the commercial one, than you take it at home. From a very pure perspective. Other side would be your own, it would be also plastic or it would be ceramic or something like this.
Ceramic, maybe, or even even I think some Chinese aunties bring their own aluminium container to the restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mostly a plastic.
Yeah, okay. But if it's plastic, then there's no difference to recap because it's the same. And the recap is you can use roughly about 1,000 times. So if you're using plastics, then the same story is if you use this one to others, but the intent is that it's getting more or less, more efficient, sustainable to get it organized. Who is paying for it? Because you will get your home disposal back. So who is paying for it? The restaurants. They are paying a small fee for getting it. But you can imagine if you have it 1,000 times used, it's not very much for this cup. And it's done anyhow by the restaurant. So the only stuff is a little bit of fee for the recap organization. So this could be what I mentioned about smaller is doing. This would be something like an ideas an opportunity to do it. I'm not sure if a recap is. I think they are also finance, but if they would run for, if they would run for investors, they may have had to have somehow yes, reporting in order to prove it, but it should not be as others. But they are not public, so it would be known to public. Yeah. So last comment, my side, we have Green New Deal, which is really addressing this idea to mobilize private investments. Taxonomy requirement, important element to have this transparency, which will be able to tackle this washing issue. And I think with this, we have much more enforcement of this taxonomy and the transparency as soon as it's really getting effective. So the opportunity in business side, with more customer awareness, you will have much more of this business opportunities also in this area, where also small businesses can start and try to implement. Yeah, this is all from my side. Interesting. Hope I'm
Okay, thank you very much for the interesting Prof. Hauer. So we have learned a lot about the sustainable strategies adopted by businesses and also about the European framework to meeting the United Nations SDGs. I think like Malaysian businesses, Malaysian government learn a lot from this. Okay, I would like to open the session for Q&A, especially from the online audience. If you have any questions for Prof. Hauer, this is your time to ask.
We cannot see that.
Yeah.
Can you say something for enterprises? It seems like current war in Russia, I get it. I heard a lot. How can we anticipate the crisis?
I mentioned before that green energy, actually green energy, was before priced more expensive than conventional. Prices is opposite way around. So from this perspective, it's supporting what the move to green energy and renewable energy. The only issue we have is because to get more energy, you have some investments beforehand, and it's not going up. So what we see currently are same environment, substitution from gas to coal, which means that if you order conventional energy before, you will get more of the greenhouse gas emissions because the coal greenhouse gas emissions are higher than gas. But if you have more already green, means it was coming from hydropower or solar power, effectively you can't have a decline price because at least it's going as this. Before you paid more than average, and now you pay less than average. What you're paying is the same as before. So from a pure perspective, it's a little bit more driving it because to move to green energy is now not just supporting the framework, but also from a financial, from a cost standpoint, more attractive. But
I think at the end of the day, what attracts every company is how much investment they can get from the investors and how much cost they can save.
yeah,
That's it. That's all.
exactly. This one is currently supporting. What we have as a problem is that some industry is require gas not for energy, but for some production. So, for example, some production of gas or also of glass is required gas. Yeah, no, not for heating, but yeah, not the heating one. The heating one really can solve. It's just you need the chemical elements of gas in order to produce something. And this is an issue because there the price has been about 3 to 4 times higher than in the past. So for these sectors, there's a real issue. For the other sectors, it's also an issue, but the issue in terms will more help to drive for going more reporting it, because now you have not just the reporting stuff and getting maybe investments, it's in addition to the investment stuff also being more efficient because the cost for gas will be higher. To be very open, in my view, it should be had in place already beforehand, because what was the reason why we had this low gas price? The reason for this low gas price was that we had the gas transported to us via pipeline rather than to have it as an LNG gas. And the second was very long-term contracts. Now, the pipelines are not existing anymore. 2 of them has been blown up, and the others at least not. So I am not expecting in return to this level. So anyhow, you need to calculate with the higher gas price. Now, whether this gas price needs to be as high as currently, not sure, but at least it will be higher because the gas price here in Asia was always higher than the gas price in Europe, due to the fact that the gas to go to Asia was required to be transformed in an LNG beforehand and retransformed later on, so I have more efforts to do it. And this will be continuing. So also in Europe, we will in future get gas by LNG. And from this perspective, the gas price will be a renewable energy price is lower, so it will be a second trick on this transformation. Regardless of the strategy which this war is bringing to all the humans in Russia as well as in Ukraine, but pure from an economic perspective.
Do you see this shift from investors that are they willing to profits in lieu of companies that are weak?
Yeah.
Do you see that shifting?
Yeah.
Even though the profits are less.
But the pressure is immense to find really good ESG investments. The money for ESG investments is in place. We have a lot of pension funds and others which are required to invest in ESG. But the problem currently is that you have not as many investment possibilities, and you had this issue of that some of them are not really one. And worst case is when you are investing something and later on it's coming out that it was not the right one, because then you have invested and you may need to remove from a pure investor's perspective. But the money is there. This was also the idea on the perception of the European Commission. It was thinking about that the money is there. The question is how can we support the right allocation.
Slowly.
It's easy for certain type of investors, but let's say for PNB or EPF, let's say, investing locally, are they enough companies that are green enough and so on, so that investing becomes an issue. Then when they talk about diversification and so on, can they diversify enough to be companies? So that is another issue. And again, it's a process. It's a process. Quite interesting.
So that really is a demand for ESG investments is much higher since available.
Yeah.
So, which is also a little bit lowering the return you are getting, because the price, also the...
Now it's an attraction for you if your company gets to be into the ESG index.
Yeah, because then
It will elevate.
it will increase, because the demand is there and it's not so much, right? So,
If you're already in that list of ESG index.
yeah. It would be increase your stock expense and your price, because demand is higher as availability.
What area of education industry is there anything with regard to sustainable business?
Yeah, we have also in the education industry a big push to include sustainable in our curriculum. So, for example, at our university, we have setting up a new strategy plan for the next 5 years. And one of the elements is that each course needs to include at least one module, mandatory module for sustainability. Each one, so regardless whether we are talking about business or whether we are talking about engineering. Each program.
Your James is in the green. Yeah. Some mistake.
Yeah.
You remember?
My friend is very good.
Yeah, we do
Now, this is a process, because for accreditation and all this stuff, it will take some time. And we have the same story as I mentioned. We also claim now that we as a university are on the way to get green and climate neutral and so on. But also what we see from a from a student's perspective is that they are demanding about this content. So they're demanding some elements on it. So a lot of modules we already included an element in terms of this one, which we can do without big changes in accreditation, that we are just adding something like this. What we saw as well, so for example, it's about now 4 or 5 years ago, we was asking to introduce a new PhD program, a master program in logistics. And as we are a public company, a public finance institution, get permission from ministry, we also get some resources for it. At the end, we got logistics, but as green logistics. So the master program is called Green Logistics. And for this additional master program, we got resources from our ministry. And the really selling proposition was there that we are preparing more or less having this content into it. Because they told us there are already some logistic master programs available, so why should we spend some resources for an additional one? Then we come off with this green logistics.
So like in your institution, you have one module on sustainability. So far,
Not
your
yet.
program-
Not yet.
Okay.
I need to embedding it when we have the next accreditation stuff on it. The issue is, one, you can now have it as a strategic goal, another is you have with also accreditation bodies, and they require before you do any changes, you need to move over the stuff.
What do you think a country like Malaysia to promote awareness in terms of sustainable business? In Malaysia, for example, because the awareness is not that high, as compared to Europe, for example. So, based on experience in Germany, EU countries, what did they do to trigger awareness to implement sustainable business?
I think.
How did you start?
Yeah. I think that the real push was coming when customers and as well as society was really asking for it. And therefore I think this idea with European Union to set up the framework in order to support that when the push is coming, that there is you can trust the investments. It was a very important one. I personally do not think that the projects which are also in Europe there will make a real difference, because there are always projects like it's a project. But the real change is coming now with all the demands for ESG investments and all the demand of examples like this recap. And because then also the private sector will do anything in order to accommodate this. And this is making the real impact at the end. The real impact in terms of, but also a little bit like, so for example, when you are in DHL, you can buy now a conversion one, or you can buy something which is called climate neutral. Now, the question is whether it's really climate neutral, because at the end it's delivered with the same van. But at least they are required to do something in order to offset the activities which is this partner. And what, for example, DHL is reporting is that the demand from the customers for this green alternative is growing. So it's roughly now about 30%.
I still remember in Germany, if Britain is water, you can identify.
Yeah, this is the next stuff that was introduced several years ago.
It was already paid 35%, 35 cents.
30%.
written about the event.
That's not what I want
Many back.
Everyone looking at
Yeah, it's also a tricky industry. It was already several years ago. I think in Canada you had as well something like some disposal, but in the US you have not. And when I was driving from Vancouver to down to Seattle, or otherwise I was not sure about. But on one side of the border you had somebody who is looking for empty bottles, collecting them. While on the other side of the border, you see the empty bottles on the street because nobody was collecting them. So at the end, it's all about getting motivation and helping people to get motivated. So, for example, any disposal on this would help to reduce waste. And what we see also from a recycling perspective, it's important to have recycling. If you are really doing recycling, you need to do it efficient. Means you need to have all bottles together and not mix bottles with whatever other plastic. Yeah, separation. So now how can you achieve a separation? You can make a lot of educational blah blah. Not sure. By the way, this is also one of the stories. Yeah, and I think you know it. When you come to Germany, it's really getting interesting because at home I have
Only 3 minutes.
my whole floor is known as
It's all different minutes.
yeah.
Different colors.
Yeah.
to.
But it's more effective.
Every house.
Yeah. Yeah. But the more efficient way, because you have to do it in all houses, and at the end you have to bring it to some area where yeah,
It
and
requires dedication.
but the most efficient way, when you have a disposal on it, because sometimes this one, we have to bring back to the stores, and the stores are getting collected and in a more efficient way separated, in a more efficient way brought to any others. Or even change into whatever bigger ones or
in terms of awareness, is there any synergy between Eastern Europe and Western Europe?
yeah, you have from an awareness perspective. In the Eastern European side, even in the Eastern German side, they had not the same awareness of it. Let's call it this. You can make it, not sure whether it's true or not true, on the results of the Green Party. The Green Party, a little bit also depending on the political structure, whether you have a two-party parliament with a majority story, or whether you have a parliamentary environment based on relative percentages of the vote. But in general, western part of Europe, Green Party has a higher percent included in some areas. Eastern part of Europe is high. On the other side, it's also increasing awareness. Increasing awareness just started just 30 years ago, while in the western part it increased 50 years ago. The founding of the Green Party somehow 1980. Beginning of 1980. With the discussion about the nuclear power, the real introduction and coming was after Chernobyl. 1996.
Chernobyl case.
And the eastern part is than in the 1990s. So therefore, about 10 to 15 years.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. Okay. So it was a very good presentation, and we had a very good discussion. Okay. Yeah. So on behalf of Child, we would like to thank Hauer for that talk, and to the online audience, thank you for your participation, and hope you again for another talk next week from Hauer. The title is Update European 2022. So we will be posters and please check on the social media, as Facebook and Instagram, and also for information about the coming. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.